Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Teacher to Teacher session on debunking myths and tips for remote learning. I'm your host, Kamal Fakhreddin, Global Solutions Specialist who's based in Dubai. And today we also have with me in here my colleague, who is also a Global Solutions Specialist, Suzanne Noor, who's in Singapore. And Suzanne will be sharing with us about today's topic. As we all know, the evolving pandemic situation has called for unprecedented move for prolonged school closures. This means that schools have to resort to having teachers teach and students learn from home. Suzanne, what do you think would be some of challenges or some of these challenges when students have to learn remotely from home?
I think that, Kamal, we are all currently in uncharted territories. I mean, who would have thought that schools everywhere in the world have closed and will be closing? Singapore will be closing next week in response to COVID-19 pandemic. And we haven't had to make life work this way before. Now, most of our students and parents are still not familiar with the routines of learning from home for prolonged period of time. Now, perhaps some chartered schools or private schools have been introducing remote learning from time to time, but most of our schools that we know have always had the teaching and learning done face to face. So the question is, how will then the learning take place? From home. How can parents support to ensure learning do take place? Because considering, if you have one child and then if you have it's okay, but if you have more than one child, how do you ensure that all your school going children are all learning? And what should students do to maximize their learning?
You've mentioned a few important questions that parents would have and how on how school and have to assure that the learning will still take place. There is an assumption that when schools are closed, students have to spend the whole day on the computer. Is that true, Suzanne?
I think a lot of people have that, that impression that when schools are closed, and we're talking about today's technology and the fact that we assume everyone has technology, but this is where I think where we need to distinguish between what we call distance, virtual, and remote learning. And you know what I like is how Eric Shaninga from International Center for Leadership and Education defined these terms. Now, according to him, distance and virtual are appropriate where all kids have access to a device and the internet. Remote, on the other hand, focuses on both digital and non-digital pathways to keep realistic learning going. And here's the thing, we cannot assume that every student has or will have a device and internet connectivity. So we will use the term remote in this particular session so that we are talking about all students that will have access to both digital and non-digital pathways of learning. So remote learning can consist of one or more of the following. Number one is that we are looking at e-learning, for example, online assessment through online digital platforms or through the school's learning management system or what we call LMS. Emails, teachers can email students worksheets or notes. And then, of course, number three is hard copy assignments where schools actually give worksheet packages or textbook to students to bring home. Um, it is important to point out that most teachers have never been adequately trained in this area because most of our teaching and learning has been done face to face, and that schools are also trying to navigate the journey to remote learning. So it's really, really something new for everyone, not just for specific schools. Maybe higher educational institution may have more experience, but not our elementary schools or our secondary schools. Now, every school has a different plan based on the needs of their students. So we should not compare the different learning pathways students are given the moment they come
Mhm.
home. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's really interesting, Suzanne. But I have like somehow a question in here. So what if the school decides that students should be doing the online and e-learning by using or like on their own, but at the same time they are only having only one internet device at home. So let's think about it. Would it be possible for the students to complete the assigned work if there is more than one child in a house or at home waiting to use the same device? Will the students' learning be affected if the students has no access to the internet as well?
I think there are a lot of questions in that particular statement you just gave, because now there are two parts to the question you just posed, Kamal.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
not surprisingly, this is a real concern. We are talking about families, obviously kids have families and we don't know. I mean, every family is unique. We have households with one child, we have household with two, we might have household with six, all school going children, right?
Yeah.
And if we assume that not all children have access to a device, let alone connectivity, we must also assume that not all households have a device and connectivity for each child. So, we're not just talking about I have a mobile phone, every child in the family has a mobile phone. We can't make that assumption because it doesn't happen, to every household. So let me answer the first part on what seems to be impossible for all children. Let's say we're talking about four kids, in the same household to do e-learning using the same device. So we're talking about perhaps an iPad, or a tablet. Now, each child's remote learning will occupy him for a few hours a day, depending on their grade level. So when we're talking about the lower grades, it's not supposed to occupy 6 hours, right? But for high school, then the number of hours increases. Now, not all learning requires a student to spend the whole day on the computer. Now, teachers are encouraged to create playlists or what we call choice boards, which have become a high agency, pedagogically sound strategy because you got all these choices given to students on what to do on a particular day, right? And that's a very good strategy to personalize learning that has been adapted, very well to remote learning. So while most schools have shared content on Google Classroom, some of the learning will not require the use of an internet device. For example, let me give you a first grade, remote learning task. Students can look through their pantry with their parents or a sibling and write down and three healthy foods that they find. So, they don't really require any kind of e-learning. And you must be assured that schools will provide students with sufficient time to complete any online work. We did that, and some of the challenge that we had, I mean, even my own son, was that how long is it going to take? And if connectivity was not very good, he's going to take even longer, right? But schools will give sufficient time to complete any online work. It doesn't have to be complete that day. Okay, and this is a good opportunity as well because we're teaching siblings to work together to take turns, right? So that's the first part on, making sure that every child has access to that one device. The second part of the question is, will the student's learning be affected if he does not have an internet device, right? Because we are not going to assume that every child has an internet device. Now, I know that there are many schools that can loan devices to students who need them. Some schools district actually spend money to make sure every child in the district has a device. And schools can also assist if the student does not have internet access at home. Teachers are also working from home, and there will be teachers who can access and assist the students online. They are able to be there to help the students as they go through the task that has been set for them. And there will be teachers in school in case a few students need computer access or other support. So we are really, really hoping that this will be an initial stage. And as I said to you, it is an uncharted territory. So when we're talking about when we're talking about what to do if there's no device or only one device at home, then you have all these possibilities happening. Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's true. So I think, Suzanne, one of the more important concerns that parents actually have is whether they have to take over the role of teaching their children at home. And I would love to hear your opinion about that, especially that many of my friends in the time being have schedules or they've like created schedules for their children on what to do exactly throughout the day. What are they doing math in the morning, or are they doing sciences in the morning? What exactly your opinion on that?
Okay, here's the thing. It's a very scary thing, but I think there's something going around in on Instagram and Facebook where you have, the parents are doing work and they're taping their children to the floor because everybody has to stay at home, and that's quite funny. But here's the thing: parents are not expected and do not need to take over the role of their child's teacher. It is
Hmm.
not, because in this time of crisis, we could still instill social emotional learning by asking parents to support their child to learn independently at home. It is work in progress. We're not expecting, like, okay, you got to start doing things on your own, but it's going to be something where parents can encourage their child or their children to ask their classmates and teachers if they do not understand their assignment. I'm assuming, we are making the assumption that anytime the students have any issues with any of the tasks, they could
Yeah.
email their teachers. If there is another platform in which they can chat with the teachers, that's even better. You know, yeah. So because we do
Yeah.
have that in our HMH platforms like My HRW and Think Central, so that's where you could actually communicate with the teachers. Now, for our youngest learners, they will need more some help and guidance, especially if the elementary school have not been one-to-one or bring your own device, right? So parents, we must understand this. Parents are juggling an equal amount of challenges and pressure. Being home, staying home, you know, or having to work later and making sure that your younger children are learning from home. So, therefore, for younger children, parents, we need to supervise them to some extent by providing reminders, not doing the work for them, you know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
providing reminders and ensuring that they are on task. Like, do you know what to do? And not only that, that brings me to the point where teachers, knowing that you are going to give assignment to your younger learners, have to be very, very clear with their communication. It has to be steps, not like a whole bunch of directions, but clear short steps. So then parents will still be able to give the space for their child to attempt the assignment on their own. So it's like, it's not just the parents, it's not just the teachers. We have to be in sync, making sure that the child learns best. And this is really, really not a time for perfection. You know, both teachers and parents must exercise patience and understanding with one another as we work through uncharted territories, as we mentioned earlier. And interestingly, this is also a very good opportunity for parents to be recreationally with and to their child. So when we're talking about that, there are also many suggested plans that parents and teachers have put up on Pinterest, or even on Twitter that you can view and get ideas from. Because at the end of the day, the key is to continue the momentum of learning. When we have kids staying at home, we want to make sure that they are still learning. And yet at the same time, it's not just about the academic work, it's more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love when you say we need to continue the momentum of learning. That is exactly what is requested and needed from parents. Suzanne, you have managed to debunk some of the myths for remote learning. So can you share some tips for the parents that might be helpful for them in order to support their child through their remote learning? What do these parents do, or what can they do?
Okay, definitely, Kamal, because what we also want to make sure is that parents feel supported. Tip number one for parents, especially, and this is something that teachers can also communicate to parents, is get ready together with your child by setting up an area conducive for learning. It can be a dining table, it could be a study desk. I set up an actual study desk separate from where I'm working so that he's able to focus on what he's doing. This should not be where the child sleeps. Okay, all right, it's so important. Do not sometimes in the convenience of home, like, okay, it's all right,
I know,
you can do it from
I
the
know.
from your bed, but that's not going to work, because then that's too much familiarity and It's not going to make the child feel motivated, and you have to check that the child has the necessary resources such as password, login IDs, and make sure that the remote learning timetable is clearly displayed, whether it's on the wall or at the table, and then arrange the relevant materials by subject in the study area for easy access. For older students, you have to make sure that your child has access to the digital tools available on the different platforms such as Zoom
Mhm.
or Google Classroom. Make sure that they're familiar, make sure that they know what to do, and encourage them to make notes, because an older student can list questions that arise during the remote learning period. See, here's the thing: unlike in school, an adult may not always be present to supervise the child at home, right? So,
Yeah.
for tip number 2, it is very important for parents to establish a structure together for younger learners, and for the older learners to agree on a structure, because you know how it is with teenagers, right? You can't tell them what to do, you have to agree to do something with them. And this include study. So we're going to do this subject for 20 minutes, you're going to take a break for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you're going to go back to the other subject, right? So we take turns. Then we have meal times. Don't forget, they still need to
Oh
eat,
yeah.
right? And rest. Yeah,
Yeah.
rest is very important. Get them out of their pajamas. Don't start the day by saying, okay, all right, it's 8 o'clock, so let's do it. You're still in your pajamas. Get them ready as if they are going to school, because we want to set the routine. And do include recreational time and activities at home or maybe online, because you know how kids are like. They love online activities. Yeah. So that will be tip number 2. Now, tip number 3 is for parents to have regular check-ins with their child or their children. Now, at the end of the day, you also want to know exactly what the experience was like. So have a
Mhm.
conversation with their child about their experience. You can talk about the remote learning experience, such as how was your day? What did you learn? Was it difficult? Was it manageable? And these are the questions that I do ask my own child too. And when he said, no, it's very boring, because I'm not doing anything interactive. And these are the kind of feedback that we could give to the teachers so that we could work towards making it manageable for them. um, would would your child need to tweak the learning area or the routine, and what other support would you require? Any queries that the child may have and wish to speak to the teachers, but they may not be sure on how about to go about doing it. So so these are the kind of things that they could ask their children. But parents could also check in with their child on the COVID-19 situation. Like,
Yeah.
because what is important is that we want to make it relevant. We don't want to just say, okay, you're stuck at home, you're going to do your work. Now, the real situation is that the reason why there is prolonged school closure is because of this current pandemic situation. So we do want them to be aware. How does he feel about the current situation with COVID-19? How is he or she feeling about being away from his friends? Is very important, especially for teenagers, and even younger kids, because they love going to schools, because they like to be with their friends. uh, do they have any questions about COVID-19? And it is okay if parents don't have the answers, because it's all about working together. We could look for the answers and learn together. And at the end of the day, I think, because we are moving into uncharted territories, we are going to affirm them for adapting and showing the spirit of resilience. And I think that's the most important thing, because this is uncalled for. No one was ready for it, and then suddenly all the schools are closed, and suddenly all the learning are done at home. So we want to make sure that we also build in our kids the spirit of resilience. Now, more importantly, at the end of the day, please remind your child, especially the older ones who stay at home. You know why we say this, right? The older ones like to, well, mom, I'm going to go out to the mall. It is important in a crucial time like this that everyone remains safe, minimize any exposure to the coronavirus. But and also minimize the time spent in public places and contact with others. So we want to make sure that at the end of the day, while we have this remote learning, we want our kids to practice social distancing and social responsibility. Yeah.
Yes, that's 100% true. Thank you for that, Suzanne. When we speak about these, and especially when we spoke about how we as parents want to work with the children, this actually made sense. Unfortunately, some of the parents do not have that discussion, or they just want like the students to do whatever is needed. So they do not put these rules and regulations that students need to follow, and that is what is leading to some, I'm going to call it, failures in distant learning and digital learning. So, what kind of resources does HMH provide to help teachers and parents for remote learning?
A good question, because at the end of the day, we also want to assure both teachers and parents that we have a dedicated at home learning support page where both teachers and parents can find free learning resources such as activities and lessons. We also have math and ELA support resources and blogs where you can read tips on how to keep the academic momentum. We talked about, keeping the momentum going, and ideas on what to focus on as children learn at home. Now, our blog support educators, families, and students. So you will also find engaging videos of our HMH YouTube channel. You will find the latest one that Michael Dispazio has added on COVID-19 virus. And there are also free downloadable resources on our HMH Pinterest boards, and free Common San Diego activities, games, videos, and more. Now, just to assure you, this at home learning support page will be updated regularly as we continue to provide the high quality resources and support that teachers and parents expect from us. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so that will be a good place to go to. We try to update as much as possible. But not only that, all of us, yourself, myself, and the whole team are working very hard to support all our schools in this time of need. So, should you have any issues or any kind of support that you need from us, please come to us because we'll be happy to serve you. We'll be happy to help you in any way possible.
Yes, that's 100% true. Also, like we're there to guide whoever, and like wherever you are, we're ready to guide you and help you in any questions that you might have. I've learned myself a lot quite today, Suzanne, and I hope that all of those that are listening as well learned from all of these tips and hints that you've shared